A volcanic rock in the Atlantic, 900 kilometers from mainland Europe, spent 5 centuries depending on diesel shipped in by boat. In the summer of 2023, it went 28 days straight without burning a drop of it. El Hierro, the smallest of Spain's Canary Islands, has no undersea cable to anywhere. Every watt of electricity it has ever used, it has had to make for itself. This is the story of how 11,000 people tried to make all of it, permanently, from wind and water alone. El Hierro is a UNESCO biosphere reserve, a dot of land 268 square kilometers wide, with no connection to any larger power grid. Before 2014, that meant one thing: diesel. A single power station burned imported fuel around the clock, and every litre of it had to arrive by ship across open ocean. Before the island's renewable plant came online, renewables covered just 2.2% of El Hierro's electricity demand. Effectively none. Diesel is expensive on an island this remote, dirty and fragile to a single delayed delivery. And El Hierro had one thing few islands have: wind that blows hard and consistently off the Atlantic, and volcanic terrain steep enough to build a reservoir 700 meters above the sea. The problem wasn't generating clean power during a windy afternoon. Solar and wind can do that on almost any island. The problem was the other 16 hours. What powers the grid when the wind stops and the sun's down? That's the part that has killed 100 Green Island pilots before this one. The answer El Hierro built is called Corona del Viento. 5 wind turbines totaling 11.5 megawatts of generation, paired not with batteries, but with a mountain. When the wind produces more electricity than the island needs, the surplus doesn't go to waste. It pumps seawater from a reservoir at sea level up through pipes to a second reservoir inside a volcanic crater, 700 meters higher. When the wind dies down, that stored water is released back downhill through a 6-megawatt station, now running in reverse as a hydroelectric plant, generating power from the fall. In effect, the island turned its own extinct volcano into a battery, one that doesn't degrade, doesn't need lithium, and can discharge for as long as the reservoir holds water. The project cost €65 million, with 35 million covered by a European Union grant. It came online in 2014. By 2023, the system was averaging 60% renewable penetration across the year, with stretches, including that 28-day run, at 100%. Every year the plant runs, El Hierro avoids burning roughly 7,000 tons of diesel and keeps about 20,000 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere. This is the mechanism behind the tiny island runs entirely on renewables headlines. Not a battery breakthrough, but 19th-century hydrophysics paired with 21st-century wind turbines, sized to fit one specific island's geology. Here's the part the celebratory headlines skip. El Hierro has not actually hit its original target. The system was designed with the ambition of covering the island's demand entirely, but in practice it averages 60% renewable penetration annually, not 100. The 28-day, 100% renewable stretch was a record, not the norm. Dry, low-wind weeks still pull the island back onto diesel backup. Industry critics have been sharper, openly questioning whether the concept delivered on its promise relative to its cost. The physical risk is narrower but real. The upper reservoir sits inside a dormant volcanic crater, and the system depends on El Hierro's specific rainfall and wind patterns, holding roughly steady. A prolonged drought or a multi-week wind lull still means diesel keeps running as the fallback most years, and the model doesn't generalize for free. El Hierro's geology is unusually well suited to pumped hydro. Most islands don't have a 700-meter crater conveniently positioned next to a harbor. Corona del Viento remains operational and is still the only island in the world to have run for 28 consecutive days on 100% wind and hydropower. Researchers continue publishing on how to push the system's annual average higher, including adding solar into the mix. El Hierro didn't solve the 100% renewable island problem outright. What it proved is narrower and arguably more useful, that a small, remote, geologically specific place can cut its diesel dependence by more than half using tools that have existed for a century. Other islands, from the Faroes to parts of the Caribbean, are now studying El Hierro's numbers, not its marketing, before they build their own version.